Hi, everyone. Welcome to our final session of Learning Redefined today. It's Showbie's first online conference. It's actually it's Showbie's first ever conference, actually. And for those of you that don't really kind of know about Showbie, Showbie is a hybrid learning platform. It has over 3 million educators globally that have been using it. It's used to provide richer, deeper, more personalized feedback to learners, and Showbie's been kind of working for almost 10 years alongside educators and has some pretty amazing partnerships and very powerful partnerships with other applications as well. For today's kind of session, we're going to be kind of I suppose I'm quite privileged, and it's been a while since Martin and I have kind of spoken, but we have Mr. Martin Willis from the Edinburgh Academy. He is now the head of digital learning there, and I'll get him to do a little bit more of his kind of introduction. But actually, I'm really kind of interested to hear from him about the use of technology in the classroom, what the strategy looks like across the school, and the whole kind of journey in terms of teaching and learning. Martin, welcome to the session.
Hi there, Abdul. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. Good to have you on board. And I've kind of noticed you're still you're in the classroom.
I am. This isn't actually my classroom. I've had to borrow one of our primary 4 classrooms, so kind of year 3, I suppose. And yeah, I've not been here since 7 o'clock this morning, but I have been home. But I thought, my Wi-Fi struggled through remote learning, so I thought, right, I'll just come back into school and do it properly.
Thank you for making the effort. Kind of really appreciate it. So Martin, let's kind of start at the beginning. Give us a bit of context about yourself. I know you're an Apple Distinguished Educator. I know that you are Microsoft Certified Expert as well. I know that you've had a very interesting journey into kind of technology and where you are today. Tell us kind of what that journey has been like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the leader of digital learning here at the Edinburgh Academy. And today that role involves me working across our nursery, our primary school, and our secondary school. We're a day school for students aged 2 through to 18. But prior to this year, whilst I had kind of the head of e-learning role at the junior school, I've been a class teacher for almost 15 years at this school. So I was 23 when I started teaching here, and I'm now, well, not 23, I'm quite grey. But prior to that, I did a marketing degree. So I didn't go straight into teaching from school. And I think, when I was at school, I was not one of the most intense, let's say, studious of students. And I remember being in my last year of school and thinking, I really need to start working now to get the exam results that I need. And one of my responsibilities as kind of a prefect, if you were, was to take charge of an S1 class, kind of that transition into secondary. And for whatever reason, the teacher who was actually responsible for that class didn't really seem to be there very often. So I ended up pretty much running that registration class and registering the kids in the morning and dealing with the issues that they came into school with in the morning. And I really think that kind of got me into it. And I remember sitting in the assembly hall on my very last day of school saying, I'm going to be back in a school at some point, and not just as a parent one day, but schools are going to have something to do with my life in the future. But I just think as a 17-year-old lad, I wasn't really ready to say, I want to go and be a primary school teacher. So I went up and did a marketing degree. And about a year into that, I very quickly realized I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing this. I've enjoyed working with young people. And I got jobs in summer holiday camps and things like that. And I ended up working my electives so that I could work at a school 4 afternoons a week whilst completing my degree. So the intention was always to go into kind of a postgrad teaching degree after that. And I took a couple of years out, worked as a teaching assistant in a local school to get some experience. Went off to Uganda and taught there for a summer.
Really?
It was quite an eye-opening.
What was that like?
So that was incredible. So I was meant to be doing the typical kind of summer student thing of paying a small fortune to go with some company to some far-flung country and, save the world, if you are. And I remember going to the cinema one night and watching The Last King of Scotland, which is,
Remember that?
Young Scottish guy goes off to Uganda and is terrorized for his experience. And I came to school the next day, and to the news that this company that I was meant to be traveling with had gone bust. And one of the teachers said, "Oh, my husband's got a charity out in Uganda. You should go out and do some work there." And I thought, perhaps, but absolutely incredible. So that kind of got me into running. I did half marathons and marathons to raise funds, and we ended up putting water systems into villages that never had water systems, and teaching in 2 local schools, and it was just eye-opening. I mean, literally a chalkboard, no glass in the windows, and just children who were so grateful to be in a school learning and so keen to learn, but having to deal with obviously very difficult circumstances. So yeah, it was a real eye-opener. And then to come back to Edinburgh and do my training, and then find myself in a school which I've not left really. So yeah, I was a class teacher for almost 15 years. I taught, early years, middle primary, and upper primary, and now do a bit of teaching in our senior school in our transition phase. But my role now is very much kind of team teaching, coaching, and really working with our director of ICT to build that strategy and to continue that strategy.
Kind of like quite fascinating entry into education, I suppose. It's people don't come into education because they're going to get paid tons and tons of money. People come into education because there has to be a real passion for wanting to be there and wanting to make a difference. And there's nothing like kind of working in a place where that's really appreciated. You can kind of feel the environment. You can feel the kind of desire, the need from children, families, and so on. So that's pretty. It's quite an amazing kind of entry into education. So, tell me a little bit about Edinburgh Academy. What's the context like? We've got an audience that is primarily from the UK, but we actually have people joining us internationally as well. So, set the scene for us. Tell us what's the context of Edinburgh Academy?
So we are a day school for students aged 2 through to 18. We're spread across 2 sites. So the site that I'm at the moment has got our nursery and our primary school. And then about a mile down the road, we've got our secondary school. We do things slightly differently to some schools or most schools in Scotland, in that we have our students on this site until primary 6, which would normally be the year before that move to secondary school. And then we actually put our primary 7 students on our senior school campus. So they've got their own building on the senior school campus. They've got their own playgrounds. They've got their own classrooms. They've got their own teachers. We've got some primary specialists in that department. But then they do go to the science building to meet science teachers for their science lessons. They have the modern languages teachers come in and teach them their modern languages. So it's a great transition piece, and it just eases that transition into secondary school. We also have a significant intake of
that actually making that happen, that transition to be a lot smoother, and getting them settled in earlier as well. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
demographics and context and so on.
Sorry.
Just tell us a little bit about the demographics, the context, and so on.
So most of our students are local, very local. It's a relatively affluent part of Edinburgh, but we've certainly got a very hard-working parent body. But certainly most of our students live fairly locally. So we do have some students that travel in to Edinburgh every day, but we've got about 800 students at the moment, and we're doing pretty well. There was a time when our numbers weren't as high as they are now, but in the last 10, 12 years, it's really grown. It's a school that's growing. I think it's growing because of its morals. We're very much a school that's small enough to know. I mean, we know all of our students inside out and back to front, and I feel that parents who come to our school know that and value that. And technology has its place, but we also value lots of other things. So we're very much into our eco schools positioning. Our learning through play is a huge thing for us. structured play, within primary. But technology sits alongside all of that. So I think they just appreciate the fact that we know what matters. And
right, yeah, of course, and that's quite key, right? Because a lot of the time schools get kind of known for technology, but there's a lot of other amazing stuff that schools are kind of doing, and technology might enhance that and support it, but actually, a lot of it is about giving children experiences and supporting them with their learning through lots of other ways, other than technology as well. But coming back to the kind of the technology piece, how did that journey start? Every school has a story around this, right? So, what's your story?
Absolutely. So when I first came to the school, we were quite a fortunate position in that every classroom had a smart board. And so because every classroom had a smart board, we thought, right, we're doing really well. But our actual student experience of technology use was a PC lab, a lab of 25 PCs, which as a class teacher, I had a 45-minute lesson allocated once a week.
Right.
And I was marching my primary twos, so year one students, up to the PC suite, getting them logged in with ridiculous usernames and ridiculous passwords, having to leave time to tidy up that classroom, ready for the next class to come in and log off. And, I had to try and fit in some teaching and learning in the middle of that. And actually what I found was we spent most of the year learning how to log on and log off of a PC. Our primary 6 students were trying to do documentary, filmmaking projects, which meant the teacher had to rent out or book out our set of digital cameras and film their content. And then the teacher had to get the SD cards out and digitize that content. And then that class had to book out the PC suite for 6 weeks to do the editing, and no one else had access to the PC suite. And then I came in one day, which must be now 9 years ago, maybe 8-9 years ago, and there was a single iPad sat on my desk. And I'd been given no prior warning that this iPad was coming into my classroom. I hadn't been told about it. It was just there. So I'd never seen an iPad. I'd never touched an iPad before. I was informed that our kind of Court of Governors had decided, they'd heard some schools had started to use iPads and they thought it'd be a good experiment. So they bought, maybe 4 to put into a year group and, have a year, play with it, see what you can do. And, quite quickly I found ways, even with that one iPad, I could enhance the assessment within my classroom, or I was just moving around the classroom more, using, having a good camera as much as anything. And then this is when I start to sound like a proper fanboy, because actually I came down to Bolton and met yourself.
What year was that?
That must have been 2000. Where are we now? That must have been 8-9 years ago. You were doing a session in a local school. We were in a hotel, and there was a school over the road. I went over to the school to have a look around.
Okay.
I can't remember the details, but I was sent down on the train to come to the session, and I was just absolutely fascinated by how confident these students were in using technology, and it was just what they did. And I came back and completely naively, I said to my head teacher, this is great. We need to go for it. We need to get more of these iPads in, but you're going to need someone to lead this project. It can't just be left to happen. Someone will need to have that job of leading it. Not for a moment thinking he was going to turn around and say, right, well, you can have that job. That's what you And then I found myself head of e-learning, and for a number of years I was doing that whilst teaching my class full time. And then gradually I managed to lose a little bit, getting a little bit of extra non-contact time back. And 3 years previous to this, I was job sharing with an excellent colleague that was a huge help. So I had 2.5 days basically to work in our primary school. Right. And then the opportunity came up for me to go whole school and step out of the classroom temporarily originally. And then the pandemic hit. And actually, I'm so glad we made the decision we did to take me out of class, because for me to have been able to support teachers and parents and learners in this last year in the way we have has been incredible. And I don't think I would have been able to do it while still having class responsibilities. It's meant I've not been able to get into our senior school phase as much and team teach and coach as much, but it's worked really well. So, I've kind of jumped on, but 7 years ago now, we made the decision to go one-to-one. across our transition years. And that is when it's become completely transformative. Having students with their own device, a personalized device, that they're able to, have the tools that they require when they need it. And our mantra is very much, we use this device when it's the best tool for the job.
Yeah.
So there's some lessons where it's not.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I kind of want to, I know you guys are using Showbie and so on, but what other technology tools, platforms are you using that's kind of part of everyday infrastructure? Not necessarily apps that you use occasionally, but just infrastructure that you use on a day-to-day basis.
So there are lots of different aspects of our strategy. And at the moment, we're in a position where we're trying to bring that together a little bit more. But as a whole, we are still very much a Microsoft school. So our students all have access to their Office 365 accounts. In the last year, that has been an absolute lifesaver because we've moved on to Teams. I mean, I never thought I'd have primary age children using Teams. Senior school phase, I've been using it a little bit for a while. But I've been really resistant, saying, nope, can't use that in a primary school. It's not appropriate for a primary school. And, to a degree, I've been proven wrong, certainly in terms of the calls and things like that. So we've got our Office 365 licenses. We use Firefly, which is our main VLE. In the junior school, it's used very much as an information hub. In the senior school, we start to use it a little bit more as a curriculum piece, teaching and learning piece with students, where they can create content and they can access content. And then we also have Showbie, which is a huge aspect of what we use. So it's really Showbie, Firefly, and Office 365 is our main.
So that for me is kind of quite interesting, and quite often I think with EdTech, education technology, I think there's this kind of thinking, hey, this is a school, you're either going to be Apple, you're either going to be Microsoft, you're either going to be Google, but you're like the second or third person that I've had this conversation with through this week, where actually there was somebody else I spoke to earlier on, and I think it was Matt Warren actually, and he was kind of saying, hey, we use Google and we use Showbie and we're using iPad and so on, and that kind of combination is quite interesting. So the question that I would naturally have now is, how does all that work together? Like, what are you using Office 365 for? What are you, and why iPad with Office 365 and, Firefly as well, and then Showbie. So how does all of that kind of connect together?
Yeah. So in terms of the Microsoft Apple conversation, first of all, I would not want to move away from iOS as our primary platform in the primary school and early transition years of secondary. Yeah. The fact that our students have got quick access to something that's, instant, but also just that creativity. So the fact that it's so easy for them to be creative in what they're doing. Today I've worked with classes where they've been filming and recording content. They've been creating music in GarageBand. They've been sharing files, large video files, through OneDrive to their peers and downloading content from OneDrive. So a number of years ago, I was really probably quite hesitant about the Microsoft side of things. I was very keen to focus on the Apple side and build that up. But actually the integration of the Microsoft apps into even iOS has improved so much in recent years. And it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There are still things that I could do with a laptop or desktop that I can't do. But, breakout rooms during lockdown was certainly one of them. But we're getting there. And so, and I quite like the fact that our students recognize the fact that different tasks require different tools. And actually, you need to be skilled. And it's not so much which tool are you using or which app are you using, but actually, do you have that mindset and that problem solving to be able to say, right, I need to do this in this way, and then this is going to talk to this. So the fact that our students are so comfortable with different platforms and how they integrate really is something I'm quite proud of, actually. So our students, they work on their iPads through primary school and then up to really S2, S3. So just before that examination stage. And then once they come into that examination stage, we widen that BYOD scheme. And really any modern laptop will do the job. That often depends on things like learning style and subject choice. But the big battle at the moment we've got in Scotland is trying to find a way that our students have a device that can be used in examinations. So we still are no further forward with using an iPad in an examination. And the SQA have not been particularly quick in improving that situation. So they need that balance of both sides. In terms of how we bring Showbie and Firefly into that, in our primary school, pretty much all of our workflow in terms of learning is done through Showbie. So as a class teacher, I've got my classes, I've got my resources. I'm using Book Creator a lot to create content, share that through Showbie, get that back, feedback. The quality of feedback that our students are receiving. I think my class got better feedback during lockdown because I was so heavily reliant on Showbie than they had from me in the classroom all year. Really powerful. And then Firefly is something that's Firefly is kind of the glue that pulls everything together. And this is where my marketing hat kind of comes into things still. Even though I didn't go into marketing as a job, I do think it's kind of stood me in good stead for teaching, because details and the kind of finite details of things and thinking, right, what does this look like for a student? What's this experience for a student? That's obviously your first priority. But then what's this experience like for a parent? And, how is this working for them? So Firefly is where teachers would go to find things like the lunch menu, the reports, the timetable, and critically for our younger students especially, what homework have they got tonight? So we tend to use Showbie a lot in class, and then Firefly for the homework tasks.
And I think that's kind of an important distinction, because I think I've been recently having more conversations, obviously, with the role that I have now with Showbie, with schools, and the fact that you can use it side by side with Google or with Microsoft and so on. And really, what Showbie is bringing to the table is that kind of feedback, digitized feedback, and certainly now on iPad as well, there's the screen recording feature with the front-facing camera and so on. So those kinds of things where you can get quite creative with assessment, quite creative with feedback and so on, and that's where that aspect becomes particularly useful. And interestingly, there are schools now that are kind of re-looking at their policy for feedback and assessment based on this type of technology. So that's kind of really interesting, and thank you for kind of unpicking that for the audience, for myself, in terms of what you use the different tools for, because there's never going to be one piece of technology that works for every organization everywhere. There's different context, there's different vision that certainly is going to kind of allow people to kind of have that flexibility in terms of what it is that they want to do with the technology. So can you share with us any kind of I suppose experiences during the time of COVID? Like, what was it like then, at that time? Because it sounds to me like what you've just described is you were kind of just in the nick of time, having things in place. Yeah. And so what was that like?
So the first lockdown, just over a year ago, I was still teaching. So I still had a class 2.5 days a week. And the lady that I shared that class with was an absolute godsend, because she said pretty much, right, I'll step up and do 5 days a week. You focus on helping everyone else. So I did little bits and pieces. I tended to do the maths and the social sciences, and she really kept everything running in the background. But, just before that Easter break, we had a week really where we'd kind of had word that we were closing. And so I had time to put some things in place. We made sure that our students were taking the devices home. So our younger students had devices that tended to stay in school. So we thought, right, let's get them home. Let's get all the passwords, all the usernames home. The hardest children for us to facilitate for were our very youngest students in primary 1 and 2, who don't have a device, who are very reliant on their parents accessing resources through Firefly. So it was a huge shift in approach for them. And we made the decision quite early on not to go, certainly in the primary school, not to go with a live approach. at all, really. It was
Okay.
all pre-recorded. And that was something that we took a long time to make a decision. Well, not a long time, but we thought about it for a long time. Senior school, absolutely. They could cope with that live content and attending classes independently, and that happened. But we made the decision that that wasn't right for our school. And just like you said a moment ago, one solution will never be the answer for every school and every setting. But for us, we decided that for our primary school children, we weren't ready to go live. So what we did was that was a huge piece for me in terms of training our teachers how to create good pre-recorded learning content, and how to share that with a class, and how to give feedback on the work that they were sending to you. But our main thinking there was, we wanted to be kind to our parents as much as our students. So we wanted parents to be able to, access content and give that to their children, but it wasn't as important as the pupil experience. So yes, I could sit on a call with a class of 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and parents might think that's great. They can go and do what they need to do for their job, but actually we weren't ready to teach a class of 7-year-olds live on a Teams call. And also, what about that student who needs things reinforced and needs to be able to re-watch content and, get things at a slightly slower pace or in a slightly different approach? In a classroom, we would never send a lesson out to all of our students in the same way. In order to aid, differentiation and access to content and quality learning, we thought, right, let's pre-record content, prepare resources, and put them in Showbie, and then schedule those to release when they're meant to be released. We use the chat feature in Showbie as kind of students knew the first hour of the day, an hour at lunchtime, their teacher would be in that chat for some live chat. And then we started to introduce pastoral calls. So twice a week, you had a live call with a group of students, maybe 8 of you and your teacher. And you knew you could talk about what was happening, how things were going, what was working, what wasn't working. And what we found towards the end of that first lockdown was actually that was what students were valuing and appreciating. And that's what parents were valuing. So we started to increase the number of kind of pastoral calls, decrease the kind of workload we were sending out a little bit. And so in the second lockdown, we thought, right, we're getting a bit more familiar with this whole use of Teams and managing a Teams call within a classroom. So we started to bring in some live teaching in maths, for example, and little sessions in reading. So we increased things gradually, whereas I know some other schools went straight into full live teaching days, and that worked brilliantly for them. What I didn't want to do was to have to pull back from that. So offer all this live content and pull back. So I definitely think that our approach worked for us. And I think actually we've come through it quite positively. In terms of my day, I was up at 7 o'clock, which is a lovely lie compared to a normal day, but my first call was at 8 o'clock, and I was sitting down to that call at 8 o'clock and recognizing at kind of 3:30, I hadn't stood up all day. And I'm sure it's the same for most people. I'd been on calls.
Yes, it was. Yeah. For a lot of, I think one of the things that certainly, from my experience speaking to different educators, the live kind of lessons were useful, and there was a place for those. But where teachers were able to screen record and make explainer videos and tutorials, I think that is something that has been kind of like powerful learning during COVID, and potentially can continue to be used way beyond pandemic and school closures and so on. Because you're right, it was something that you said about students being able to go back, listen to the tutorial again, and look at the explainer videos and come back to the teachers and so on. There was one teacher that mentioned to me during this week on one of the sessions, can't remember who it was, but they said, the fact that a student could come and say, I don't understand what's going on at 2 minutes 10 was a bit of an eye-opener for that teacher to say, actually, this is really quite powerful and so on. And then the parental aspect is something that can't be ignored, because if parents have explainer videos that show concepts, ideas, the metacognition of the teacher on how they're doing things, then that puts the parents in a really kind of participatory kind of position where they can actually take part and support the child better, because they're in a position to understand how the teacher, and our age-old conversation of we didn't do it this way is something that goes out of the window. So I think there's some real opportunities that COVID has kind of presented that allows us to kind of reflect and think about how we might move on in the future as well. So that's kind
Absolutely.
of very, very.
And I think this is an ideal time and ideal opportunity to stop and think, well, actually, let's press the reset button. Let's not just necessarily come back in the summer and do things the way we've always done them. This is a great reason to question why we do things the way we do, and perhaps changing things. And certainly I hope that, and it's what I'm seeing a lot in our secondary school, is that teachers are now more confident in that kind of flipped learning approach.
Right.
And I hope that does continue.
Yeah. Look, Martin, this has been happening to me all week. Every time I do these kind of conversations, as we started, which kind of felt like about 10 minutes ago, and I've looked at my clock and we've kind of gone past the 30-minute mark and so on. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, but I'm not going to do now, because I think we'll probably have another conversation. I'll bring you on board, and maybe with another teacher as well, as I really wanted to explore the nursery aspect that you mentioned, and what that looks like with technology and so on. Because a lot of the thinking at the moment is, hey, we're not using technology in nurseries or for early years, and it might be with the teachers and so on. So that's something that I think we should have. I don't want to cover it in like 3 or 4 minutes. I think that there's some real opportunity to discuss things, and potentially for me to learn about that as well. And we'll definitely kind of schedule that at another time later in the year or something. But I just want to kind of take this opportunity to thank you for your time, and the fact that you've come back to school to do this, because there's better bandwidth. I think it's kind of a quality in teachers that we're seeing at the moment, and certainly during the pandemic, they kind of going the extra mile. They're there to kind of support others as well. If people want to get in touch with you to kind of explore more on what you've said, find out more potentially about early years or nursery and so on as well, we've got your Twitter handle here. Certainly, I'm sure they can kind of reach out through there. But your email as well, they can get in touch with you.
Yeah. Absolutely. More than happy to share my email. It's mwmartinwillis@gmail.com. But yeah, Twitter is very much my go-to. I do have a blog, which it's funny, last February, I wrote a blog post on my blog saying, I'm going to try and write something on this blog every single week. And then the pandemic came and I've not done anything since. But I do have a blog at ipadteacherblog.com, which I'll try and get something on soon.
Just say that again. What was it called? iPad Teacher
blog.com.
iPadTeacherblog.com. I think that's kind of quite easy to remember.
Yeah, but certainly Martin, Twitter is the go-to.
Thank you very much. Kind of really appreciate your input and your insights and your sharing. I just want to remind people that are watching this live, watching this right now, that at 8:15, in literally 13 minutes, 12 minutes or so, please come and join the EdTech Chat on Twitter with Matt Pullen. His Twitter handle is at MAT6453. That's Matt6453. And there's going to be kind of conversations around Showbie, around remote learning, around hybrid learning, and so on. And you feel free to kind of have a voice and take part in that conversation as well. Thank you very much, Martin, once again. And I'm just going to say to everyone that's with us, have a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. And we'll hopefully see you again tomorrow for our final day of Learning Redefined, where we're going to be focusing and speaking to teachers from the Nordics, which will be something that I'm kind of been really looking forward to as well. Thank you very much.